idea what a soldier I've been for more than 13 years. I've been made fun of as a actor and as a drug dealer and everything. It's all ending now.
I'm trying to help you, Brandon.
Pressure. It's a universal feeling. We all experience it. At work, at home, in life. But imagine this. You're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. A company that you built from nothing with a mission to revolutionize an industry. That's pressure on a whole other level. For Brandon Truaxe, founder of Deciem, his work wasn't just revolutionary. It was personal. He wasn't just creating groundbreaking products. He wanted to expose the industry's flaws, challenge its norms, and make quality skincare accessible to everyone. And he did it. Brandon changed the game. But the relentless drive to innovate, to grow, to push boundaries came at a tragic cost. In 2018, Deciem was thriving, but behind the scenes, Brandon's personal struggles were spiraling out of control. And soon as vulnerability was broadcast, unfiltered, to the world. Through Instagram, we watched in real time as a brilliant mind unraveled, attacking competitors, cussing out customers, shaky front camera rants accusing his co-founder Nicola Kilner and the CEO of Estee Lauder of corruption. Fans were screaming, "Someone help him!" What we didn't see were the people who did try, and the limits of how much anyone really could help. Brandon's story is more than the evolution and downfall of a visionary. It's about the emotional toll of living authentically in a world that demands perfection. It's about our societal hunger for scandal and spectacle and the human cost of relentless innovation. This is the extraordinary true story of the ordinary, part 2, and it starts right now. The beginning of possibly the most chaotic time in the history of skincare happened at a time when things are typically pretty peaceful. The winter holiday season. This happened back in 2017. Deciem, the abnormal beauty company, had launched 11 brands. They had met their goal of 10 brands and then launched their 11th brand, The Ordinary, which completely revolutionized the entire skincare industry. We'll get into more into why later, but just know it blew up everywhere. It disrupted everything, and it was so popular that it was sold out everywhere. They had so much trouble keeping it in stock.
I've come to London's Covent Garden to preview a very special offer from the abnormal beauty company. Nicola Kilner is here to tell us more. What do we have?
So this is our first ever Deciem beauty box of 5 of our hero products from 5 of our different brands. So you're going to get from The Ordinary our 30% AHA plus 2% BHA peel. You're going to get from Nude our multi-molecular serum with those 15 different types of hyaluronic acid. From Fountain, you'll get our hyaluronic molecule, so that's a supplement of hyaluronic acid. From the Chemistry brand, you'll get our hand chemistry, so that's our anti-aging hand cream. And from Hylamide, you will get our HA blur, which is really about instantly perfecting the skin.
A wonderful collection. Find out more on our website right now, qvcuk.com.
In order to get it back in stock and sell at retailers like Sephora, they had to get an investor, and beauty conglomerate Estee Lauder jumped in a record fast deal to scoop up 28% of the company and fund that expansion so that Deciem and The Ordinary could continue to grow at a record fast pace. The news media was talking about The Ordinary so much. It was all over social media. All of the skincare influencers were talking about it. And it was a time for the team to just go and let's just chill for a minute. Let's just go off on our individual vacations, take a little break for the winter holidays, and come back refreshed and ready to kick some butt. That included the two co-founders, Brandon Truaxe and Nicola Kilner. Nicola took off to New Zealand and Australia with her husband, and Brandon took off to Amsterdam. The location where Brandon went is very important because in Amsterdam, psilocybin mushrooms are legal, and Brandon had been experimenting with them. He'd even offered them to Nicola once, who politely declined because she was not into that stuff. But Brandon was. Brandon was all about always making himself better. He wanted to expand his mind. And there is research to suggest that psilocybin mushrooms can do that. It's supposed to make new connections, new neural pathways in this plasticity of the brain. It kind of capitalizes on that. And Brandon was all about that. And he planned to do some serious experimenting over winter break. I did do a little bit of research on psilocybin for this piece. And one thing I learned was that the effects of psilocybin can be unpredictable. And if someone has an underlying mental health issue, this can exacerbate those problems. It's really important to set the context here in that Nicola says that Brandon was not a substance user. He was an occasional drinker, in that when they would go out for dinner, he would have a glass of wine or a drink or whatever, but he never abused it. He was never drunk. Ever. He didn't smoke cigarettes. He didn't do drugs. He didn't do anything. He was just fascinated by mushrooms. And we don't know exactly what happened in Amsterdam when he was there over the holidays. All we know is that he came back very different. His personality had changed. There's no way to know exactly what happened when Brandon was in Amsterdam. All we know is that his substance use increased. He started shooting videos of himself smoking cigarettes.
Guys, you know I don't smoke. I'm on all kinds of drugs and shit. Everybody depends on who you ask, with a different kind of drug, but a variety of kind. But I don't smoke, okay? Everybody knows I don't smoke.
Some people also believe that this is when Brandon tried crystal meth for the first time. So the big thing I want you to take away from this section is that this was a complete 180 for Brandon, that he went from being a casual drinker with dinner to being a substance abuser. And this escalation seems to be the trigger for what happened next. Brandon was always looking for ways to improve himself, to make himself better, to increase his ability to work better. He had told Nicola that they were like rabbits in a field of elephants, and these giant elephants couldn't fit into these teeny tiny holes that the rabbits could go into. So it was their job to look for these rabbit-sized holes and fill them in the market. It's possible that the drugs that he was using, he felt would bring him to that next level of evolution. Unfortunately, it didn't do that. This is how the story goes. So, it's January 1st, Nicola's with her husband in New Zealand, and they're having a great vacation. She gets a phone call from Brandon, and he is panicked.
And then I remember getting this call from Brandon saying, you know, you need to go straight to the airport with he was like, have you got your passport? I said, yes. He said, you go straight to the airport now, book a first class flight, come straight to Toronto on the next flight, turn your phone off, turn your emails. He was just like, calm down, let's be relaxed, but you need to come immediately.
So he didn't tell you why?
No, but I could just sense it was an entirely different person I was speaking to.
All of a sudden?
Over that break in the holidays. I mean, the flight from Australia to Toronto, I think I was on the plane now, traveling for about 20 hours. I cried the entire way, because I knew something really bad was happening.
I've watched a bunch of interviews with Nicola, and when people question her about this, she doesn't really go into details about what Brandon wanted or why she needed to fly out so immediately. Because Brandon was a weird dude, and he made weird choices, and sometimes he would make snap decisions, and people didn't quite understand the vision, this behavior wasn't completely out of character. So Nicola and other people on the team were kind of like, is Is something really wrong, or do we just not see his vision? Like, is this one of those situations where he just sees something that we don't and everything's gonna be okay? And I think that's why people didn't intervene or see this as being super strange from the very beginning.
Everything had changed, and it was just like talking to a stranger. He had this like coldness in his eyes, and he'd gone from someone who, the second you see him, there'd be hugs. There was just so much warmth. All of his emails would have hearts on. There was just kind of all of this love in messages and kind of just being, to just this almost kind of zoned out, cold person that suddenly almost felt like kind of just had this like, it's like he didn't understand. There was no understanding anymore between him and any of us.
What was the crux of that meeting? Were you able to decipher what you were called there for, or was the fact that you weren't able to decipher what was the urgent necessity that was in itself the wake-up call?
I guess an example that stuck with me was Brandon telling us that he wasn't going to have a cell phone anymore. And again, that's kind of the example where, because Brandon was such a genius, you kind of listen to his reasons and you think, well, actually, it does make sense. Sometimes we are all now addicted to our cell phones. We're not living in the present. Maybe we would have more time and those things. But then also it was, for someone who is running a big business and has all of these responsibilities, it's also not a normal thing to say, I'm suddenly going to throw my cell phone away and turn my emails off and not be contactable. So it was kind of things like that, which were kind of, I guess, just difficult to navigate. And especially because it had been such a quick change from being the Brandon that we had known for the last few years in December. And then suddenly in January, the holiday break was perhaps 2 weeks, and then kind of just seeing such a vast difference. And I remember finding it really hard because he truly is such a genius and a visionary. And this has happened so quickly. And I remember like ringing Sean and saying like, does he have a point? Like, are we too caught up in time? Like, is this just like, are we taking things the wrong way? So I had a lot of confusion just around like, how can something change so quickly? And again, this is someone who, over the 4 or 5 years of being like insanely close to him, I was going to Toronto at this point for like 3 weeks out of the month, and we'd have every dinner together, breakfast together, lunch together, every weekend together. And never seeing any episodes of mental health or anything changing. So suddenly you have this drastic change of someone you loved, but someone suddenly who feels like he's completely closing the door to you and kind of pushing you out. This was an indifferent person who was angry, shouting, crying, scary. It was suddenly very cold to everyone.
What happened in that break? Do you know? Have you got any suspicions?
Yeah, I think he was very curious, and I think he took everything to an extreme. And I think he'd been reading a lot around psychedelics and kind of how to access different parts of your brain. And I think he experimented a lot during that break.
And do you think that triggered some kind of psychotic episode?
Yeah.
As we get deeper into the story, I just want to make a little quick production note in that a lot of the screenshots and Instagram stories that happen here, which is where pretty much everything was chronicled, they're all gone. Like if you click on the articles there's so many of them linked down below. I've read so many articles. There are all links to Instagram posts that no longer exist. And unlike my James Charles series, where a lot of it was documented on YouTube, I could go to the Wayback Machine. I could capture it from there. With Instagram, it just doesn't work like that. So unfortunately, a lot of the screenshots are lost to history. The links to the articles will be down below, but a lot of the links to the Instagram posts are broken. But I will be inserting every screenshot that I could find, every Instagram post that I could find. There is still a lot in existence, but there are some holes, and that drives me absolutely freaking bonkers. But after months of research, I had to at some point give up trying to find some of this stuff. One incident that was very well chronicled, and there are screenshots to show this happen, was when Brandon directly attacked Drunk Elephant, which is a very high-priced skincare brand, very, very popular then and now. The basic reason why The Ordinary existed was that Brandon was pissed at the industry. He thought that brands were overcharging for basic ingredients, and he thought that that was morally wrong, and he saw Drunk Elephant as a major offender in this. And on The Ordinary's professional account on January 12th, he put up this post. It said, "Our 100% cold-pressed virgin marula oil from Namibia is here. Referred to as a luxury oil by some, this antioxidant-rich oil is obtained from the kernels of the fruits of the marula tree. It's a fantastic oil in every sense of the word, despite its affordability. One would have to be drunk to overpay for marula. This formula contains the highest quality cold-pressed virgin marula oil that is naturally aroma neutral and non-greasy." And then it shows the price, £8, 10 or $9.90. This is compared to Drunk Elephant's $69 price tag.
Our virgin marula oil is delivered in its purest form. I found a supplier with a patented process that extracts the oil directly from the pip or seed of the marula fruit. There are no solvents or heat used that alter its structure. This keeps our oil more nutrient dense.
Of course, customers are not stupid. They were quick to make the connection that Brandon, or whoever was running The Ordinary account, because we didn't know it was Brandon at this point, was throwing shade at Drunk Elephant. Michaela McKenzie at Allure went so far as to call the post judgmental, accusing The Ordinary of insulting not only Drunk Elephant, but Drunk Elephant customers. She wrote in her article, "The Ordinary, which we've quickly come to love for bringing inexpensive products to the market, shouldn't be judging people who want to buy a different brand. One would have to be drunk to think that's okay." I'm not sure quite what happened in Brandon's mind after this feedback, but he seemed to take it in and realize that maybe that wasn't the best choice. And soon he would issue a formal apology. But also, he would be taking over all of Deciem's social media accounts by himself full-time. Just to stress the magnitude of the impact of The Ordinary at this point in time, the reach of this company. In 2018, The Ordinary was sold in over 42 stores. That's not to mention the other brands that were under the Deciem umbrella: Neod, Hylamide, the chemistry brand, Stem, Fountain, Hif, WhiteRx, AbCrew, and Esho. They were also working with the Hut Group with their newly acquired brand, Grow Gorgeous, that they had just bought from Deciem. And they were still nurturing their original project Inhibitif under the hand chemistry brand. I was able to find some things on the Wayback Machine, and I was able to look at old versions of the Deciem website. And what's interesting is one thing that's never changed about this brand is at the very top of their Deciem homepage, on every brand's page really, there's a list of all of the Deciem brands at that moment, which was super helpful for creating this video. So at this point, not only did they have all of those brands, but there were also 4 brands in the works: Loofah, Halftone, Hippo, and Stencil. It was reported that during that time, there was a Deciem product sold every single minute. So to say Brandon had a lot of responsibility is something that I can't even wrap my brain around. And in that responsibility, some leaders would choose to ignore their mistakes, but Brandon didn't do that. He came out with a formal apology to Drunk Elephant and their CEO, Tiffany Masterson. According to an article in The Cut on January 28th, the Deciem Instagram account posted, "A distasteful joke that arose from my familiarity with the beautiful brand Drunk Elephant Skincare and Tiffany Masterson. I'm sorry. When I met you at the WWD breakfast, I saw a beautiful soul. And you have worked so hard to build a beautiful brand. Please forgive me. I have now adjusted that distasteful post, and we will donate $25,000 to the Peaceful Elephant charity that your brand supports at Save the Elephants. In response, Tiffany accepted his apology. She said, "Thank you, Brandon. Loved meeting you, and this is wonderful." In response, Brandon wrote back, "This forgiveness means so much to me. Tiffany, I deserved being blocked. Thanks for unblocking." So it seemed like Brandon had come to a peaceful conclusion with this. He had realized his mistake. He had apologized. He had been forgiven. All was well. But unfortunately, this was the very, very beginning, because even though he was laying off of brands, he was about to start attacking a different group of people, his own customers. So remember when I said that Brandon was taking over all of the social media accounts for the entire Deciem portfolio?
From now on, I'm going to communicate personally with you.
He also made a very interesting choice on February 1st. He publicly announced that he would no longer be the CEO of Deciem. Well, at least in name. He wanted to not be called the CEO, but to be called a worker. He said in a post, "Responsible people don't need CEOs, and I've never liked any of my bosses in my life, so I don't want to be a boss. I want to be a friend. I want people to be my friend and not my employee." Now, this may have been a shift in mindset for Brandon, because in the CEO role, he had to be professional. But if he was just a worker, well, he could kind of say whatever he wanted, I guess. The post I'm about to share may seem pretty random, but I want you to pay attention to what he's saying and see if you can find the patterns of behavior and the escalation for what happens later on in the story. Also, I want you to think about what you feel like Brandon's underlying message was to everything he was trying to share through these posts. So again, we're in the first week of February, and Brandon started posting, for lack of a better word, some weird ass shit. So he's in Morocco, he's with Nicola, he's with his friends, he's with other people from the Deciem team, and he starts posting pictures of garbage. 7 pictures of garbage. And in that, he decided that he was going to announce that they were going to be changing their package at Deciem to be more sustainable. And he publicly broke up with their packaging supplier in these posts. But you can tell he kind of felt bad about it, like that maybe this guy was a nice guy, but he knew he wasn't going to get sustainable packaging from him. So in the post, it was reported that he offered to relocate the owner of this packaging company from China to Canada if he wanted a job. Which, if you're trying to be Brandon, you're trying to put yourself in his shoes, maybe he thought that that was a nice thing to do, but it's weird. It's just weird, but it was about to get weirder because the next post was literally a picture of a dead sheep. The reason behind this post wasn't to show death, but to reaffirm Deciem's commitment against animal testing. So again, it's like, this is so inappropriate, but if you're an out-of-the-box thinker, maybe you can see the logic in posting something like that. I'm not saying I agree with this in any way. I'm just trying to get us in Brandon's mind of how he could justify something like this. Again, we're still on the same day. Brandon posts a post that was very personal, and he mentions for the first time a person that's very important to him named Riyadh Sweden. Now, the post says, quote, "Riyadh is not my boyfriend. I'm not gay." But then he talks about how he's going to be traveling with Riyadh and that he is my brother and I love him. And he also mentions that he gave Riyadh's family $500,000. Why do we know this information? Why is he sharing this? We don't know. Same day. Here comes another post. It is a post of a man in Morocco, and he's carving soap, and he calls him a gentle old man. And he says, specifically, he tags a staff member at Deciem and is like, "Hey, I want to recreate this soap for customers." And he also talks about how he wants to create jobs in Morocco. So customers are starting to get a taste of what it's like with Brandon in charge of the Deciem social media. We're getting a bunch of randomness, and people are just confused because before this, Everything was a typical brand page other than, them having some unique perspectives on how skincare can be marketed and things like that. But there's never been anything like this before. This is a whole different thing. And some people, rightly so, were not happy with the direction of Deciem's social media and unfollowed. It was reported that they lost over 5,000 followers just in those couple of days. On the next day, because he's done for that day, we're now on February 5th, Brandon addressed concerns about his posts from the day before. He said, "Many of you love what I did, but a few of you disliked it, criticized it, and even unfollowed us. I'll listen to you and build a social content management team." He said he would also donate $200,000, including $50,000 from his own savings, to charity. And coming as another big surprise for customers, Brandon announced just a couple days later that they would be closing their hair care brand called Stem. He called it too expensive and said that they had rushed through it. But it's the next day that I think goes down in history as one of the most heartbreaking brand closures of all time. If you remember part 1, we left off Dr. Tijan Esho and his brand Esho that had just launched in October. Dr. Esho was a famous TV doctor. He was a specialist in lip care, lip augmentation, and it was his dream to have his own brand. Brandon had promised him that he would work hard with him to develop these amazing lip care products that were specifically either for treated or untreated lips or both. But Dr. Esho had some red flags in that the brand launched and he didn't even know it launched. He was just getting messages that people had purchased the products, and also that he hadn't even tried the final samples of his products when they launched. So things were a little bit weird. But Tijan and Nicola had been on QVC. It had sold out twice in that period of time, so he thought things were going pretty well. He had heard there were a few complaints about the formulas, but Brandon had promised him that everything was going to be okay. Everything was not okay because Brandon decided to publicly break up with Tijan on Instagram. When I tell you Tijan was blindsided by this, he was blindsided. The post was just this: a screen with the words "TJ, forgive me." And the caption said, in part, "I am sorry to post one more time despite my promise because I owe my friend TJ Esho. TJ, you trusted me and I was too busy. We were all too busy and the formulas were rushed and almost everyone hated them. Prudvi, who is the chemist, he's still the chemist over at Deciem, has now fixed them, but I need to say goodbye to you because we are too busy to love your brand enough. We have some stock. As we sell through, we will pay you 100% of revenues generated instead of the 5% we agreed to until stock runs out. I will give you all the formulas and the trademark is yours." He then asked for support from a list of people represented by initials and for forgiveness from Tijan, customers who bought Esho who, quote, hated it, as well as customers who loved the products. Tijan did respond publicly at the time saying, "Well, I am disappointed to have not been told prior to the public announcement on Deciem's social media that my line is being discontinued. I do believe that as one door closes, another opens. For Esho, this line of products is only the beginning." And I can feel in there that he's trying so hard to be professional. Like he's just absolutely crushed inside. And that was kind of the end of what he had said at that point. But a few months later, Tijan did put up a full video on his YouTube page talking about what happened. And I am going to play you a couple of clips of that video. The full video will be linked down below.
You know, when you're there and you're having that, it's quite overwhelming because you go from having a product that you use in your own clinic and then someone says, "We're going to make it better and we're going to actually make this big line. It's going to be global." And you can't really imagine that. Imagine you as a Deciem fan there watching this and someone comes to you and says, "We're going to do that." It's very big. And to be fair, I gave a lot of trust, and I put all my trust in that because they had created all these formulations. I'd never done that before. I can create the concepts as a doctor. I'm not a formulator, so I had to give a lot of trust towards that side. And I remember a specific conversation with Brandon in his car actually that made me decide, I'm going to go with him. Was when we sat down. He said, "Look, this is a very daunting thing that's going to happen. You know, when we're putting your name, you know, it's a part of you on there. But he said, you know, he'd been through things where people did him wrong, and that he would never do that to me. And that, you know, just know he would always be on my side. And I think it was at that moment I thought, right, okay, I'm going to sign. And I did. And I probably signed a contract that, in retrospect now, with the knowledge I've got, I probably wouldn't have. But because it was just part of something else, something bigger, you know. Even when the product was released, I was like, I only found out at the same time you guys did. You know, I remember being in clinic, and I wasn't even sure we were going forward with the final bit yet, or what that was going to look like. And I was getting tagged in my Instagram, people going, oh my God, I bought this product. And I was like, what? You've got my product? Like, you know, I haven't even got my final product. And then, so I called Brandon, and I was like, Brandon, you know, what's going on? You know, I didn't know it was getting released, you know, what's happening. He said, I'm sorry, as Brandon does, you know, spoke really fast, and then said, you know, I'll sort it, but it's okay. Everybody loves it. So, you know, that was okay. So again, I kind of was reassured by that. You know, then the Instagram "Forgive Me TJ" post happened, and that was like a wow. You know, I remember, unfortunately, I was going through some stuff myself. I was query diagnosed lymphoma. I was lucky I got the all clear, but it was a very, very scary time for me, particularly with my parents who suffered from cancer. And I was just actually at a meal with some friends, and, you know, they were cheering me up over some investigation, because I actually just had a biopsy in my neck. And yeah, I saw the post, like all you guys did, and I thought, what's going on? You know, you just spoken to me just less than a week ago, telling me about how things are great, we're going to reformulate, and then, you know, have plans to expand the brand. And then on the internet, it's telling me that you've canceled it. You know, I just wanted to hide. I'm not going to lie, I cried. It was a very intense, hard place to be. I didn't understand it. And Brandon, you couldn't find him. He was not able to contact him. Nicola was there, but she was trying to deal with a whole heap of things. Because just to put in a picture, remember, this was the week where Brandon had started to post all these strange posts. And that, for me, was when he had changed the most. You know, he was always unusual, but people can be. But there was a definitive change when Brandon went to Africa, and with these posts started changing. I remember being concerned and actually messaging him myself, you know, saying, everything okay? You all right? And he would say, I'm fine. Why is everybody asking if I'm okay? And I would just leave it at that, because I didn't want to push the issue. But, you know, I was concerned. I knew people around him were, but I never knew it was going to result in that post directed at me, with everything else also going on.
Nicola Kilner, Brandon's co-CEO, was asked by Racked, what the heck happened with Esho? What is going on? And Nicola responded, we had some feedback from customers that they didn't like the taste. And then she admitted that Brandon hadn't talked to Tijan before he put that post up on Instagram and before he closed the brand, but she couldn't tell the news outlet why he had done what he had done. In a phone call with Elle magazine, Tijan did tell them, and this is so heartbreaking, I remember being very emotional, and I just cried. I didn't understand. Even though what had happened wasn't due to me or any control I had, I felt responsible, like I let everyone down. I had a lot of young Black doctors and minorities saying, you're really inspiring us to do something. We don't see that often. We don't see Black guys owning cosmetic lines, so I remember telling Brandon that this is more than just me. Now, that being said, and I feel like this really speaks to Tijan's character, he did see Brandon getting attacked for the choice that he made. And he made it a point to post on his social media this quote, I more than anyone have a right to be mad, but I'm not. From a doctor perspective, currently, this is a man that is different from the one I know. I'm not going to put labels, but something is not right. We need to try to support whatever he is going through right now and the reasoning. Honestly, we all have to. I hope you all see this and hear my words from someone who deserves to be angrier than you all. XXX. So beyond this public breakup with Tijan and the no filter that he seems to be having with these posts, he also had no filter when talking to customers who were critiquing him. I mean, imagine this. You are posting a criticism on a brand social media account, and then the brand says back to you, you need more followers with a kissy face emoji. The reply that got the most backlash and the most press was a person who had simply asked Brandon if he was okay. That's it. She just was concerned, asked if he was okay. He said back to her, yes, but you don't seem so well. Please use modulating glucosides when it's out. Goodbye. Now, we will never know 100% why Brandon recommended this particular product to this particular person. Here are the facts that we know. The person who posted was a Black woman, and Brandon was recommending skincare for her. Considering she wasn't asking for advice, we can infer that Brandon was saying that she was in need of this product, inferring that maybe he saw something with her skin that needed to be quote unquote fixed by the modulating glucosides, which is absolutely a nasty thing to do. It's horrible. Like, why would you do that to somebody? Now, I don't know where the media got this from. It may have been an official source. It may have been an unofficial source. I just don't know. But they reported heavily in many different publications that the modulating glucosides was supposed to have an ingredient in it called ascorbyl glucoside, which is a skin lightener. So the media reported that Brandon was specifically targeting this woman and telling her that she needed to lighten her skin. When the product was released, that ingredient actually wasn't in the product. The product was actually marketed mostly as an anti-inflammatory. So if you look at it from that hindsight perspective, knowing that it wasn't a skin lightening product and that it was an anti-inflammatory, I'm kind of making the connection that it's possible that Brandon was telling her to calm down, to not be so inflamed. That's what makes sense. But there was this narrative that was pushed that Brandon was being racist because of this ingredient that never even showed up within the product. So it is up to the individual person what you want to believe as far as that situation. But based on the facts, it doesn't seem like this was specifically targeting her skin color and telling her that she needs to lighten her skin. Because in the end, we don't know what Brandon meant by what he said. We will never know. What we do know is that customers absolutely were not happy, and they were pleading with Estee Lauder, with Sephora, please do something, stop this man from what he's doing. Brandon responded to one of these posts, bye-bye, you don't know which Estee Lauder companies to tag, and you don't realize they don't control our company, and they won't agree with your stupid post. Brandon. So as all of this is happening, Reddit starts doing what Reddit does best, which is digging. And they decided in some skincare forums to start looking at the Glassdoor reviews for what it was like to work at Deciem. And they found a lot, especially in newer posts, because apparently the issues were deeper than Brandon's public rants. I'm going to link the Glassdoor reviews down below. I'm also going to link some Reddit threads in case you want to go deeper, but because this video is so long, I don't want to go into every single one because it's a lot. But basically what you need to know is that people overall weren't happy, mostly with what they called chaos in working there. One person said the idea of doing things abnormally is cute, but in reality, it doesn't work. They also talked about how management, not just Brandon, but other people who worked there, talked to employees in a rude way, that they didn't listen, that they verbally attacked people. I want to read you a little piece of this 4-star review of what it was like to work at the corporate office. It says, hire people who belong here, not just people who are renegades and rebels. Some people need to be dependable and stable. Not everyone can be a maverick. When speaking directly about Brandon, it seemed like people either really, really loved him or really, really didn't like him. For example, there's this one post that says Brandon's very intelligent, caring CEO and founder, while another post said the owner, Brandon Truaxe, is the most egotistical, rude, arrogant, narcissistic person I have ever worked with in my career of many years. He thinks he understands business and he does not. He may create good products, but as far as running a business, it's like a child playing store. He was totally out of control and has no respect for others. It's all about him. absolutely the worst experience of my life. There was also reports of inappropriate interactions with employees from other people in charge at the factory. So the Deciem factory was run by two people, Mina Razek and the man I mentioned earlier, Riyadh Sweden. Racked reached out to some of the employees, and they said that both managers would frequently talk about employees' weight and their bodies, and that Mina, two employees said this, that Mina pinched their stomachs. They said she just comes up to you and grabs your rolls. A second person said, I remember once sitting on a chair and she came up to me and pinched my stomach fat. And I turned around and she was laughing and everyone was there. And that was like normal behavior in the office. Ugh, absolutely disgusting. Rack did report, though, that other employees at the time denied that this happened. Of course, we were not physically there to see what happened, but I think we can all agree that there was probably some kind of chaos going on throughout the company. And this would become evidenced even more when Brandon would make a decision that made absolutely no sense and was also absolutely heartbreaking. He was about to fire his best friend in the entire world, his co-CEO, Nicola Kilner. On February 22nd of 2018, it was reported widely that Nicola Kilner had been fired. Through my research, I read a couple of accounts of what happened here. Some people say that Nicola was at an event with Brandon and she really pissed him off because she was asking him if he was okay. Another account said that she had had a meeting with a person that was really good friends with Brandon. His name is Shameen Muhammad Jr. He will come back in the story as well. Apparently, she had had this conversation with him about Brandon's mental health and frustration with what happened with the Esho brand, and that Shameen went and told Brandon that, and that's why Nicola got fired.
And then there's business things that start to happen that make no sense, that are actually quite mean. You know, cancelling a brand on Instagram, a big partnership we had done with someone, cancelling a retailer on Instagram.
He went on Instagram and told them, said to your following on Instagram that
this brand's no longer going to exist. So
before telling them?
Yeah. So we'd spent all of this time with Dr. Esho, building this brand.
I know Dr. Esho.
Yeah, and then it cancelled. Like, Tijon found out on Instagram with everyone else that this brand that he'd put all this passion and energy in was ended. Retailers were ended. It was just horrible. So I did challenge him. And what happened when I challenged him was I got a meanest response around how I just don't understand him of all the people I should understand.
Gaslighting.
And just, yeah, and be like, you look back and like nothing was making any sense. And then I got fired because again, and he wasn't technically allowed to, like, you know, you need board approval and all of these things, but there was no rational actions at this time. So this just accelerated so quickly. And then it's so difficult because then anyone who's trying to help gets pushed out. So then everyone's, and again, like in the background, like because it's all of these early team members, like everyone wants to help him and protect him. And everyone's like, what do we do? And you know, that's the hardest thing about, you know, mental health and drug abuse, which then like circle together. But ultimately, when it's affecting someone's brain, they can't necessarily recognize that themselves. And someone said to me, it's like you're speaking Polish to them. You may think you're speaking English, a common language. There is no understanding in that conversation of what each other is saying. And actually that did start to make sense.
Again, for anyone who has been around someone who is suffering, you'll often know if you try to help that person, you're the first one pushed out. And that's what makes it so difficult when you can see someone who you believe needs help, you want to help them, you want to support them. But if you try and help and support them, you often get pushed away. So I left in February, but I was very much connected to the team the whole time.
But why did you leave? As in, so was it?
Brandon fired me.
Right. Okay.
Definitely,
What was that like? I mean, let's talk about that. Was that a shock to you?
I think because we'd gone through this, again, it was probably 5 or 6 weeks of just this erratic behavior happening. I think it almost actually gave me the tick box to say, actually, because again, with mental health, it's something that's not easily diagnosed. And it's something where you question yourself, does he seem poorly, or actually am I just not understanding things? And you kind of, because, you know, within the erratic behavior, you also have normal conversations. It's a very up and down process. And I think when that happened, it almost gave me the reassurance that said, actually, I know this is not Brandon, because every conversation we've had, like just everything we've been through, this scenario would never happen. So I think if anything, it gave me comfort from the sense that actually what I'm thinking is correct. Like he does need help, because actually this is not kind of a normal behavior.
No matter what, whether it was one situation, both situations, or neither of those situations, Nicola was absolutely fired. Brandon didn't fire her, though. He put that task on their resources director. Her name is Nia Gupta. And Nia had told Racked that Brandon had come into her office and sat down on the floor in her office and was bawling and crying and saying that he needed to fire Nicola. When asked to elaborate on what happened, Nia told them, "I love Brandon and the team unconditionally, and I'm too hurt to comment further." I can only imagine what this was like for Nicola, like the devastation of this. I had read back on an Instagram post from when she got the Cosmetic Executive Women Award the year before. The caption next to that had said, "The most beautiful night. I'm so honored and touched at Cosmetic Executive Women for the recognition of doing what I love with the people I love. Forever blessed. At Deciem is my life. Brandon is my calling. I am so happy I found you." And a year later, he fired her. Regarding the firing, Brandon did make a statement. He said, "I don't want to let people go. Hiring people is difficult. Firing them is very difficult. But when you have no choice, you have no choice. Ultimately, it doesn't affect me. The only thing that matters is that the consumers are buying the product, but the drama is just hurting my team." And what's ironic about this is that at the time, Nicola was the one in the press trying to calm everything down, and Brandon was the one that was exploding everything. So I find it very ironic that he sounds like he's accusing Nicola of being the drama, which I'm assuming he's talking about questioning his mental health and, you know, asking if he's okay, that was the drama he was speaking of, in the same time period that Brandon is blowing up all of the Deciem social media with absolutely drama-filled posts. And it seems that the firing of Nicola was also way too much for another major player in the Deciem team. His name is Stephen Kaplan, and he was in charge of all of the financial stuff. His resignation email read in part, "Taking into account everything that's been going on over the last few days, and especially after seeing your email regarding Nicola's termination, I see no reason for my continued presence at Deciem." Needless to say, Brandon was a little bit pissed at Stephen resigning. He said in a public statement that he shouldn't have given Stephen a little bit of power, and that it is really destructive that Stephen could not just accept the fact that a 40-year-old is the CEO and in his 60s, he's reporting to me. Though Stephen didn't respond to Brandon's statement specifically, he did talk a little bit about what it was like to work at Deciem. He said in an interview, "If anybody says anything, they're terminated. It's not the way I want to live. It's not the way you run a business." I think, unfortunately, in reality, the two people who really tried to have Brandon's back and the business's back were Nicola and I. I am always going to voice my opinion. Nothing's going to hold me back. And Brandon didn't like it. Even further, Brandon told WWD, "It's my house. If someone doesn't like how I decorate my house, it doesn't matter if they're my mother or a guest. They have to leave the house." So now imagine you're Estee Lauder and you own 1/3 approximately of this company. I can't even imagine how much they were losing their during all of this. Like, I can't even imagine how much they were freaking out. After Nicola was fired, Brandon shared an email that he had sent to Leonard Lauder before he fired Nicola. And it's just wild to me. Can you imagine
Like sending this kind of an email to Leonard freaking Lauder. This is what it said. I'm out of breath and have left our store. I'll terminate Nicola with generosity and gentleness tonight. If your team starts to worry, please let them know I am calm and am not making any irrational decisions. I'm worried about your team's view of me more than anything. I'm so sorry, Leonard. I know you did not invest in me to live a painful drama. I'll work hard to make it up to you and your team. So it's clear that Brandon knew that his behavior was odd and out of the norm. And he really did care that he was doing things that affected Estee Lauder as a company and Leonard Lauder as a person. But clearly he felt like this was something that he needed to do. We don't know exactly how Leonard himself reacted to the situation, but the Estee Lauder companies did put out a statement to Racked. They said the Estee Lauder Companies is a minority investor in Deciem, and as such, we do not have the power to control the company's operations, social media, or personal decisions. We believe in Deciem's incredible creativity, innovation, and product offerings. Just as a side note, as all of this was happening, customers were pissed. They were so mad that there were entire threads of people setting their Deciem products on fire. It was wild. We all know that life is a series of choices, and one choice a person makes can lead to the next and the next and the next, kind of like a domino effect. And I feel like that's what happened from February to October in the life of Brandon Truaxe and everybody that worked at Deciem. That one domino just pushed the next one over until they were all falling down. The biggest thing that happened in March was that people started comparing the way that Brandon was posting to the way that Donald Trump was posting on what was then called Twitter, that it was just kind of out of pocket, and just all over the place, not really making much sense, and really just sharing things that didn't need to be shared. Brandon was not happy about this comparison. He said, quote, "Whether you agree or disagree with some or all of the thoughts of @real Donald Trump, please respect him as president of a powerful nation and don't compare me with him. Your comparison would make both of us and anybody intelligent angry. Please respect presidents of countries and founders of businesses in the same way that you would respect your family, your friends, your colleagues, and our collective world at large." And just like the last one about the modulating glucosides, I found it interesting that a lot of the news reports left out the part where Brandon had said that he didn't want to be compared to Donald Trump. And again, you have to decide what Brandon truly meant by this, whether it was a praise of Donald Trump, but you kind of have to decide on your own. I'm just here to give you the information so you can decide what you think. But I just thought it was interesting that they specifically cut out that line where he said he did not want to be compared. Two major posts happened in April. First, Brandon posted a picture of the front of a location that was in the works of being opened on Fifth Avenue in New York City. And in front of that door was an unhoused person who was sitting there reading a book and smoking something. I've read so many accounts of this, and again, I feel like the articles were written to make Brandon look as bad as possible. What they left out was the original caption, which said, "Our upcoming store on Fifth Avenue. Never disrespect a harmless human in need of care." After the backlash for the photo, Brandon did put out a statement, and there's definitely some questionable pieces in here, but it kind of gives an idea of what he was thinking by posting this. It said, "Look, I just don't understand. The homeless person was sitting smoking a quote unquote cigarette, reading a book happily at night in front of a $1 million a year that I can't afford property on Fifth Avenue across from the library. Actually, this person is disrespectful to the beauty of the library. Ugh. He is disrespectful to the beauty of Fifth Avenue. Ugh. But this person was so peaceful." This is where you kind of see where he was coming from. He was just reading a book, which homeless people should do more of. Oh my gosh. "He wasn't bothering us. So when construction people told me we can't get in, kick him out, I said, you can get in, just ask him. Can we please get through the door?" So it sounds like Brandon was degrading this person, number one, obviously didn't have respect for this person, obviously took a picture of this person without his permission. But his logic was he wanted to show how good he was being to this person. The construction people were not respecting this person. And instead of calling the police, instead of yelling at the person, just go up to the person and ask them kindly if they can move. You don't have to be rude to them. So it's very multi-layered. In the end, this post is gross, and the reasoning behind it, in my opinion, is gross. But I think it's important to accurately represent what he said and what his intentions probably were. When he was questioned about posting this picture, like, did you even get consent for posting this? Brandon responded, if the person in the photograph has an objective, they can sue the photographer and they can make a claim. This is why people ask for a release. Otherwise, the rights belong to a photographer. We took the risk. If he has an objective, he would reach out to us and we would either pay him damages if he claims, or we'll just take it down. In my opinion, this post was extremely insensitive and really not treating the person as if they were human. But if you look deep enough, you can kind of see where he was coming from and why he thought that this was a good thing and a good idea. It just makes him look super, super ignorant. And I think that the media not covering the entire story does cloud the whole thing, but that's why I want to tell you everything so you can decide what you think. So all of this is happening very quickly, and Brandon is getting a ton of negative press, a lot of it rightfully so. He was about to have another story covered pretty inaccurately. I was able to find the original posts from The Ordinary Facebook page, still had a post on this. That's the only way that I know what really happened in the situation. So here's what happened. Apparently, he fired the entire US team, which actually didn't happen. People recognize that was a strange decision because The Ordinary and Deciem were expanding further into the US. They had that New York store that was under construction. They had 9 other stores that they were planning to open that year in the US. So firing the entire US team would have been a weird choice, but he didn't do that. Essentially what he had done was that Nicola had hired 2 people. One of them was a woman named Dakota Isaacs. Dakota was hired to handle the US PR team. And what Brandon had decided was that he didn't need Dakota yet, that he was going to use the current UK PR manager. Her name is Dion, that Dion was going to handle the US PR at Jump, and he just didn't need Dakota yet. He had clarified in the post that it wasn't because they were doing a bad job or he didn't want them to work there. He said, we have so much respect for these 2 loving and lovely girls, and told both of them that once we do organize a US-based PR team in the near future, we will offer them to join us again. But that's not what I remember happening. That's not what the mass media covered. So it's like I'm kind of torn because Brandon is acting erratically, but at the same time, I feel like that it wasn't reported what actually happened during that period of time, and his actions weren't represented fairly. Just as a side note of what's coming, Dion also gets fired. I don't know exactly when she got fired, but she gets fired too, and Nicola will eventually rehire her. But we're not quite there yet. So on April 25th, I think that the perception of Brandon went from this guy's either an asshole or he's just quirky or he's just weird to something maybe seriously wrong. Brandon posted 2 videos to the Deciem professional Instagram page. Here's the first one.
I'm trying to help you, Brandon.
Jonathan, this is abuse.
You need to calm down. Brandon,
Jonathan?
you're getting killed. Please listen to me.
Jonathan?
Brandon, you'll end up getting killed. Brandon.
Jonathan, please tell them that I won't sue them. This is going to go on Instagram for Deciem in exactly 1 minute, unless the car arrives very close to me with my luggage. This will go on Instagram. I'm going to wait here. Jonathan, it will come.
Here's the second video.
Zook, I'm serious. Please help me. Zook, I'm serious. Please help me.
A source told The Cut that Jonathan in this video was Brandon's lawyer. And you can see in the comments for this video that people were really confused on how to react because they were like, is this supposed to be funny or are we supposed to be really concerned for him? Like, what's going on? And Brandon stressed in the comments through the Deciem account that yes, he was being very serious. But then the next day, Brandon did something, I keep saying gets weirder. It's going to keep getting weirder, okay? So the next day he posts a video and I couldn't find the full video. All I could find was Elle Magazine had a transcription of this video. Here's a small clip that was in another video. It's very short though.
Hi everyone. I'm just really enjoying reading all the idiots that write both on Instagram and all the sloppy journalists that can't even afford their phone bills to keep saying that I've got mental health issues. I don't have mental health issues. Yesterday and the day before, I was at risk. I'm gonna look at a lion and smile at him. If I see a vulture, you're gonna get sued.
And here's the transcription from Elle of what he had said in the full video. Hi everyone, I'm just really enjoying reading all the idiots that write on Instagram and all the sloppy journalists that can't even afford their phone bills who are saying that I've got mental health issues. Stephen Kaplan, he was the CFO that had left when Nicola left. Your wife Danielle wrote that nasty email saying that I have mental health issues. You're all jobless now. I don't have mental health issues. Yesterday and the day before, I was at risk when I called for help, and the idiots that said I have mental health issues, you should have helped me. Anyhow, I'm safe now. Love the people who support me, and those idiots who don't believe me. Anyone who's abused me, including that idiot, couldn't understand what he said there. Article that you wrote, you stole my picture that you don't have rights to. My counsel will sue tomorrow morning. Start respecting me and my company. Otherwise, believe me, if I look at a lion, I'm going to smile at him. If I see a vulture, you're gonna get sued. Escalation continuing. The next day, when Brandon says that, by the way, they're leaving Sephora. They're going to leave Sephora. He just says, hey, we're having payment issues at Sephora and we're leaving it. And he starts this pattern of tagging Donald Trump for some reason. We don't know why. Here's what it said. At Estee Lauder Companies, at Real Donald Trump, in the other order, if and only if hope is on the horizon. I arrived on time, but clearance is taking a few minutes. Leonard, please wait for me for our belated 4 o'clock birthday. Note that the photo, the watch, says exactly 4 o'clock on it. The post continues. I've bought your loving new wife an infinity, 00 per above, present and past and future. If only if, you kindly and gently, non-destructively allow. Our loving followers, I had scotch on the flight. This is not normal because you have to remember that Brandon had never done anything like this before. He was always weird. He was always quirky. But public posts like this that just didn't make sense and were just outright just inappropriate and talking to specific people, something was seriously wrong. Part of it may have been that last line that he had scotch on the flight because remember, Nicholas said Brandon wasn't a drinker, so it's possible he was just really drunk. And this is where he announced in a comment response to somebody on that post, we're leaving Sephora due to payment issues, but will launch online and in stores with Ulta and Douglas imminently. This does happen, but it's a while before it happens. It was announced the week after formally that Deciem absolutely was leaving Sephora. Allure reached out to Sephora and a spokesperson said at the time, while it is disappointing that Deciem has decided to change direction, we remain committed to evolving our unrivaled range of skincare products to meet the needs of our clients. I don't know what was happening with Brandon behind the scenes, but it was bad. It was really bad. And that was evidenced the very next day when it was reported to Racked that Brandon had sent multiple company-wide emails. They were sent to Brandon's attorneys, the attorneys for Estee Lauder, the Estee Lauder executives, including Leonard Lauder. The final line of the email read, I'm done with Deciem and everything, no need to discuss. But it seemed like this was just an idea in Brandon's head because it didn't happen. He didn't leave Deciem. yet. In early May, Brandon started ramping up his attacks on customers in the comments on Instagram. One customer asked if Brandon was going to go back to talking about skincare on the Deciem account, and Brandon told them to FO, which I'm assuming is off. And the second one is Brandon telling a customer how rich his team is and how the person is probably sitting somewhere eating chips. And of course, we know on social media people can celebrate clapbacks and things like that, like, oh. And there were people that were doing that, but mostly people were like, what the hell? Like, what is even happening? We also found out through an incident, a really big incident in Brandon's life in May, that he started taking crystal meth regularly. So this is how the story goes. He's in a hotel in London, and he said that he wanted to take the crystal meth to, quote, prove he could still remain focused on his suspicions that there was fraud going on with Estee Lauder. And apparently he called the police on himself, and when the police got there, he was arrested, I guess, for possession of crystal meth. I'm not 100% sure why they arrested him, but then he was hospitalized for the first time. After spending a few days in the hospital, Brandon checked himself out.
And I remember when he first got sectioned, feeling such a sense of relief that he was finally going to get the treatment he needed to get better. And it was actually in London when he got sectioned for the first time. And then he was out 5 days later.
So in the middle of all of this, Deciem is still trying to function. Like, they're still trying to go about their regularly scheduled program, for lack of a better term in my mind right now. They're still trying to go about business. And the thing is that because of Brandon's erratic behavior, people were kind of freaking out and like, oh my gosh, Deciem's going down. I need to stock up on all my favorite stuff. So order quantities actually started going up within the brand. Along with that, they launched a whole new company in the middle of all this called Abnomaly.
I think we're ready.
I'm not even close.
What?
I said I'm not even close.
Deciem's Facebook page at the time said that Abnomaly was created out of boredom. No, really. Each product was apparently designed to stave off restlessness in the Deciem lab. The first launch was called Petro What. It was a multi-purpose balm that was for chapped lips, ragged cuticles, and frizzy bits, meaning your hair. It came in 3 different flavors, guava, pineapple, and coconut milk. They were £7 each. But not long after Abnomaly launched, Brandon was hospitalized again, this time in Toronto. As Brandon told the Financial Post, he said he was arguing with a friend. The friend called the police and they committed him to the hospital. But again, he checked himself out about a week later. So Brandon gets out of his second hospital stay, and it seems like something happened while he was there, that something changed within him, and he decided that he was going in the wrong direction and wanted to course correct. He calls up Nicola Kilner on the phone, and he's upset, he's crying, he's apologizing, and he's begging Nicola to come back. On July 3rd, Brandon announced publicly that Nicola was officially coming back. So what you may be wondering is, she was fired in February and now it's early July. What was she doing all this time? And basically she was like, what am I going to do? Like, she was obviously just traumatized by this whole event. So her and her husband just took off to Ibiza for months. I mean, she's the CEO of a company. She can afford to go do all that. So her and her husband, they take off to Ibiza and they're just having a relaxing time. And during a relaxing time, what's better to do than to get pregnant? So that's what Nicola did. She had always wanted to be a mom and she saw this as an opportunity. Now that she's in this stress-free environment, she doesn't have a job, so she might as well have a baby and be a mama. But given the opportunity to go back to Deciem, to help Brandon, to help this company that she had grown from nothing, she decided she was going to go back.
Yes, in the June, he was sending me videos crying and just saying like, I need you back. I don't know what I've done. Like, I'm so sorry. And I remember feeling like I can't help if I'm not there. Maybe if I'm with him, maybe I can help him. So I went back.
It seemed like Brandon was trying to change the narrative around him and Deciem going forward. On the same day that he announced that Nicola was coming back, the news channel in Canada, CBC, published an expose interview with Brandon talking about what had happened and the future of Deciem. I highly recommend you watch the whole thing. I think it's only like 8 or 9 minutes long, but I want to play you a couple of important clips.
At Deciem's Toronto headquarters, we meet its high-energy, enigmatic founder and CEO, Brandon Truaxe.
We are becoming a substantial company. I mean, in a year and a half from now, we're going to be the size of Dolce & Gabbana.
Besides the company being abnormal, Truaxe proudly proclaims that he is screwed up. It's all part of the image of a business and a CEO doing things differently, an image that allows him to say things like the traditional skincare industry is a scam.
Business is so simple if the product has a function. Like it is so simple. It becomes complicated when you're trying to convince somebody to buy something that they don't need.
So Deciem doesn't try to sell people stuff through traditional advertising. It relies on social media, mainly Instagram posts, and word of mouth from loyal customers. The apparent social media meltdown hit a boiling point when even people inside Deciem started wondering about drug use or mental illness. So I asked Truaxe what was really going on.
But we've spoken with a couple of people, and some of them said they were a little bit worried about you because in some of these posts you were saying, they're out to get me, people, I'm in trouble, I need help.
Yeah, but in some of the posts I said I'm CIA, and at the post before that I said we're making a movie. So those people should just basically, if they don't drink alcohol, they should just order a shot of, Don Julio and relax. We're a beauty business. If I was unsafe, I wouldn't go on Instagram and say, please come and save me.
He's getting attention and people will remember him, and one of the biggest challenges in marketing is to sort of get noticed.
Professor David Soberman says it could all be a well-planned marketing campaign, and all this weirdness might be a ruse.
You don't really know whether or not it's completely orchestrated or whether it's reality. And I think it's somewhere in between, but I think there's more thought to it than maybe we're giving credit.
If you go down in the basement and you hear rats, the best news that can happen is if somebody comes and checks and there was no rat. The worst news that can happen is maybe you've got rats all over the roof, but I need to get to the bottom of that.
It's a lingering cloud over the company, but Truaxe turns that to his advantage.
Bad publicity that you explain is actually better than good publicity. Because good publicity, you always question.
And as you can see, it does look physically like Brandon has been through a lot, but he seems clear-headed. He seems like he has a vision, and he seems like he's moving forward with the company in a good way. At this point in the timeline, remember, they pulled their products from Sephora. They're looking at going into Ulta, but Brandon makes a very odd choice, again, to be very public about business decisions. And this business decision was to leave Beautylish. And he ends up putting up an email from Nicola to Nils Johnson, who is the CEO and founder of Beautylish. He puts it up on their public Deciem account. It's an email from August, and Nicola is very kindly just saying, I'm sorry, we just can't have our products in Beautylish anymore. I'm sorry. Like, she's trying to be super professional. But the caption next to this is clearly from Brandon. It says, upcoming episode 2 will outline the reason Nils' extreme disrespect for our divorce after much mutual love, so that our audience can understand such reasoning for the very necessary divorce. A reasoning that you, and then he tags Shamin, who we had talked about earlier, Nicola, and an account that I didn't recognize from before this, must be a friend of his, understand well. Thank you for our meeting on Saturday, Brandon. And then he says, apologize on behalf of Nicola and the team for the misspelling of the name of the great GOW brand made for Victoria Health and stocked by Victoria Health. I see a great fit between the three of you. GOW would likely perform well on your platform, and I would suggest that you carry and stock their offering with permission from their exclusive stockists. Okay, I think that what I could gather, I had to do a lot of digging to figure out what the hell this meant. Okay, but I think I figured it out. So I'm thinking Brandon's being extremely passive aggressive here. That's what it seems like. So GOW stands for Garden of Wisdom, and it looks like they are a direct competitor for The Ordinary. They have that same format of those ingredient-focused, low-cost products. So in a Vox article, it was revealed that The Ordinary had recently been pulled from Victoria Health in March, and then they were replaced with Garden of Wisdom. So something happened. Something went down with Nils. We don't know what happened. All we know is that I read an article from a year or two later. He was still mad at both Nicola and Brandon for how this went down. But whatever happened, it was bad. And Brandon seems to be suggesting here that Beautylish carry this competitor to The Ordinary instead of The Ordinary's products. But what's interesting about this timeline is that if you've ever heard of Good Molecules, that is Beautylish's brand that is the direct competitor for The Ordinary. The Good Molecules launched 6 months after this was posted. So this is what I think. I think Brandon was pissed somehow, somewhere about brands copying the concept of The Ordinary. I don't know if he knew about Good Molecules. I don't know if he knew that they were looking to carry other brands that were competitors to The Ordinary, or if this interaction spurred the creation of Good Molecules. I don't know. All I know is it went real bad with Nils real fast, and that Good Molecules launched 6 months later. So of course, as we're watching this, as a customer, it's like, why is he publicly sharing so much of his private information? Why do we know this? It felt inappropriate. It felt like walking in on your parents having sex or something like that. You know what I mean? It felt like I'm not supposed to be here watching this. This is not my business. But it doesn't get any better. In fact, it gets worse. Before we get to October, which is when really hits the fan, I want to pause for a second and talk about the accusation of why didn't anybody do anything? Why is no one helping him? And I think I figured it out. Okay, do you remember back in part 1 when we talked about Uoko, which was Brandon's first skincare line, and how he had somehow finagled when he sold the brand to retain with his business partner 99% control of shares of the company? I think that's kind of what's happening here, that Brandon still wanted control of Deciem, but he knew he needed investors because they just couldn't keep up with the demand for the products from The Ordinary. Remember, they had all these investors, these private equity companies that were trying to invest in The Ordinary and in Deciem, and he didn't want to do that, because what I read was that these private equity people, as most would, wanted some level of control, but Brandon didn't want that. Here comes Estee Lauder, and they see that vision that Brandon has, and they see that he's grown this company from nothing, and they see that he's wacky and weird, and that he knows how to do this better than anybody, so they put that trust in his hands in exchange for that 28%. They let go of all of their control. And Brandon talked about that earlier. We talked about it in this video, and he talked about Estee Lauder did not have any control over any of the operations of the company. Right after the acquisition, Brandon had put up an open letter talking about Estee Lauder now being 28% owner of the company. And he said in that, while I do sincerely believe that ELC, Estee Lauder Companies, has embraced everything about us, the facts are nonetheless very clear. They have a minority shareholding position. They do not control our decisions or dictate our direction. And I continue to remain CEO, and there's documentation in place to make it nearly impossible to fire me. So in short, they literally couldn't stop him from doing any of this. He had control of the Instagram accounts. There's another letter that he wrote publicly during this time where he talks about how Shamin changed the Instagram login on him and how he was super pissed off about that. It was basically like, don't ever freaking do that again to me. They tried. They did everything within their power, but Brandon set it up so that no one could ever take his power away from him. That's why nobody did anything, because nobody could. At one point, Nicola even talked about that they reached out to Instagram and they were like, dude, can you help us? And Instagram's like, he's an adult and it's his company. He's the CEO. What do you want us to do? They couldn't do anything. She did allude to that maybe they had taken down a couple of posts, but for the most part, Instagram wasn't doing anything to help them. They couldn't.
It's a very hard line. I mean, we talk to Instagram like this. It's such a difficult, you have free speech. You have someone like it's a platform, like people can post what they want. You know, some things would get removed, others wouldn't. But it was just an awful situation to be in. And I think everyone just had such a huge desire to help him. And like in this time period, I mean, even like Estee Lauder companies were behind the scenes. They were so supportive to us. But again, you have, you go on Instagram and you see all these comments. Why is no one helping him? What are you all doing? And again, it's so hard because people don't see that situation of it is pretty much impossible to help.
So Estee Lauder had to do something that brands very rarely do: take legal action to fire their CEO. Okay, we're at October 8th of 2018, and this is when shit not literally. It didn't literally hit the fan. It figuratively hit the fan. I'm like, shit literally hit the fan now. That would be wild. That actually didn't happen. But figuratively, it hits the fan October 8th, 2018. This was the day when Estee Lauder decided to stop putting up with Brandon. And you'll understand why when you hear what he did next. So Brandon posted a video to the Deciem Instagram that he was closing the company. That's it, closing the business. And the reason why he was closing the business? Widespread corruption at Estee Lauder.
Hi everyone, I'm Brandon Truaxe, founder of Deciem. This is the final post of Deciem, which we will shut down all operations until further notice, which we have 2 months. Please take me seriously. Look, this is Justin, retail store. This is Brandon Monte, leads our social. Riyadh, please be safe. The three of us, plus Prudvi, and maybe a couple of others, are only the one we're going to together. I am not able to control the sentencing of the most beautiful people I just mentioned, Justin, Brandon, Riyadh, and if they're involved, but almost everyone at Deciem has been involved in a major criminal activity, which includes financial crimes and much other. You have no idea what a soldier I've been for more than 13 years. I've been made fun of as a porn actor and as a drug dealer and everything for 13 years. It's all ending now.
Shortly after the announcement, Deciem's website looked like this. Just a orangey red screen. He demanded that all stores be closed. The news media would go to the closed stores and people were just standing outside, basically like, what the fuck? It's business hours. I want to go in. I want to buy something. They couldn't. People in the stores were hanging signs apologizing because they didn't know what was going on. On the same day, Brandon posted a rambling message on Instagram. And when I say rambling, to Deciem customers, this was so confusing and disturbing. I'm going to read it to you. It makes absolutely no sense. He says, quote, "A revolution is coming. Every one of you who has been laughing at me will certainly face criminal prosecution." And then he mentions hotels like Hyatt and Marriott, so many porn studios, nearly all Deciem employees, most of Hollywood, British skincare guru Carolyn Hirons, British journalist India Knight got 2 mentions, Too Faced founders Jeremy Johnson and Jared Blandino were mentioned, so many others. No real explanation of how they were connected or what they had done, but it was kind of insinuating that there was some kind of conspiracy, some kind of plot. We just don't know. Then he puts up a second post with another list of different people, I guess, and entities that he thought were corrupt. Pride organizers, It Cosmetics, Tom Ford, actors like Brad Pitt and George Clooney. There was one cryptic line that said, Argo stood for Ali Rashawn Go, you idiots. If you remember from part 1, Ali Rashawn is Brandon Truaxe's birth name. He also sends a very important warning to Riyadh that we talked about earlier. He says that Riyadh needs to be extremely careful in the next few hours. It was just disturbing. And at the time, I remember people really not being empathetic toward Brandon because of things he had chosen to do. There was the modulating glucosides thing where the media had reported that it was about skin whitening when it was actually an antioxidant. There was him being compared to Donald Trump and making it look like he was okay with that comparison when he absolutely wasn't. He was telling customers to off. He was firing people. He was insulting people. So the empathy just wasn't there in the public for what was happening here. I think people just didn't know how to react. Also, side note, somewhere during this time period, Nicola got fired again. I don't know when exactly that happened because there wasn't as much press about that, but he did fire Nicola again. 3 days after this, Brandon posted a series of emails from Estee Lauder Company's lawyer, Mark Gelowitz, saying that Estee Lauder violated the terms of their shareholder agreement. So the publishing of these emails gave Estee Lauder the final piece that they needed in order to bring legal action against Brandon, because the distribution of those private emails was against the terms of their contract. What they wanted to do was stop Brandon from having any control over the company, to revoke his use of the Instagram account, to make it so he couldn't hire anybody or fire anybody. And they wanted to put Nicola in his place. They wanted to hire her as the interim CEO. Now, again, I've watched a bunch of interviews with Nicola, and Nicola is very adamant to point this out, that she never thought that her being the sole CEO was permanent. She saw this as she's going to get things together while Brandon gets the help he needs. Once he's better, he will come back as co-CEO with her. In response to Brandon finding out that they were trying to remove him, he posted 9 posts to their Instagram account, including photos of his hotel where he currently was in Amsterdam. The very next day, a Canadian judge did back up Estee Lauder, and they removed Brandon as CEO and put Nicola in his place.
And then you have people that say, look, someone has to reach rock bottom. Like, they have to just reach rock bottom until they get better. So then in October, Brandon had done an Instagram post basically saying he was shutting down the entire company and there would be no more Deciem. And obviously that was the point when the shareholders had to step in, because suddenly, you know, I think at that point we had 800 employees. Like, there was everyone's jobs on the line. And again, you think, look, maybe this is the kind of bottom point he needs to reach to actually understand he needs to get help. So that's when the court order happened to remove Brandon from the company, which again is an incredibly hard situation, because no one wants to remove the founder who they care so much about, and, you know, a founder who is such a visionary and is the brand. Like, to feel like he is being forcibly removed from his own company is very difficult. But you've also got a situation where everything was public, so every email sent had the whole company on CC, had all the journalists, had all of our retailers, had customers on. Instagram posts were obviously going to everyone. So you're also living this out in public, which I think also makes it a lot harder. So in October, he got removed as the CEO.
They publicly announced that Deciem operations were expected to resume as soon as possible. But I also want you to keep in mind that at this point, Nicola's 7 months pregnant. So I cannot even imagine the stress that she was under during all of this. Like, I can't even imagine. After Brandon was removed, the Deciem Instagram specifically was put on private. It just couldn't be accessed, which was probably a good idea to just kind of stop that for just a minute. The Wall Street Journal reported at the time that Ontario's Supreme Court Judge Michael Penny said, quote, "Urgent relief is necessary in order to save this business." He added, "It appears that Mr. Truaxe's behavior is not his normal behavior, and he may be suffering from some type of psychiatric problem." In their lawsuit, Estee Lauder claimed that Brandon's behavior had caused, quote, "irreparable harm to Deciem's business and chaos and confusion for Deciem's employees, customers, consumers, suppliers, landlords, and other stakeholders," because you can't just shut down the stores, right? In leases, they have clauses in there that say what days the store can be closed, and he was going against those leases. But it seemed like, at least from the reports, the landlords were pretty forgiving of that little bit of an interim considering the circumstances, which they got very lucky about. Apparently, during this time, Brandon also decided that he was going to lease a new headquarters for Deciem and also to buy a private plane. That happened too. By October October 16th, their Instagram was back and they had a message there, and it spoke of teamwork and reopening all the operations, their commitment to serving customers. And then it finishes with, Brandon will always be the founder of Deciem. We will take the passion and values he's instilled within us as we continue to grow brands we have created with transparency, integrity, authenticity, function, and design. And then they thank everyone, nod to the future, all of that. Reports at that time said that the board of directors at Deciem was very small. It was Nicola and Andrew Ross, who was the executive vice president, and Pasquale Cusino. And if that name sounds familiar, he was the guy from part one that we talked about had invested in getting Uoko, Brandon's first skincare line, off the ground. He was also the original investor in Deciem. So he was the main board member. Apparently, this came out in the lawsuit, Brandon had forged Pasquale's signature on some board documents that would replace Pasquale with someone that was more loyal to Brandon. So when Brandon talked about corruption within Deciem, he was most likely talking about Pasquale. Another thing that was important that happened within this is it prevented Brandon from accessing Deciem's computer systems, where they kept all of their records, where they had all the customer databases, all of that. Because remember, Brandon is a computer programmer, so they were really nervous he was going to go in and use his computer knowledge to really mess up things on Deciem's back end. So that way they stopped him from doing that. But this is the thing. If we've learned anything about Brandon up to this point, is that he does not like being silenced. So therefore, he started posting all of the things on a personal Instagram account called Truaxe. And on this account, he posted a very threatening message. This is what it had said. I'll be in your hometown in a few hours. Please advise if you prefer silicone-based or water-based lubricants for my approach into your criminal, destructive C word. For the most politically correct wording, you have now illegally removed access to my phone, email, and social channels. I'm confident that you know the world will have never seen a downfall greater than that of the fraudulent empire ELC, the Lauder family, and those related have built. So this direct threat is what prompted Estee Lauder to file a restraining order against Brandon. And in that restraining order, he wasn't allowed to go anywhere near Estee Lauder offices. He wasn't allowed to go near anyone in the Lauder family, and he wasn't allowed to go to any Deciem location, none of the stores, the factories, the main offices. He wasn't allowed to go to any place. He had to keep his distance from anything related to either Deciem or Estee Lauder companies. Because you got to remember, for perspective again, that at this time, Deciem was worth $3.3 billion. So this was a huge deal, what was happening here for Estee Lauder companies and everybody that worked at Deciem, hundreds of employees, and also all of the customers that were watching all of this go down in real time. One last thing I want to mention about the legal part of all of this is that Brandon was accusing Estee Lauder companies of corruption. So as a response to that, Estee Lauder companies actually agreed to appoint PricewaterhouseCoopers to investigate any claim that Brandon had of corruption or criminal activity within Estee Lauder. They said, yeah, go ahead, investigate us. Try to find something because we're not doing anything wrong. They apparently didn't think they had anything to hide. The reasoning for that apparently was to call Brandon's bluff. Meanwhile, over at Deciem, remember, Nicola has been rehired as CEO and she now has control of the direction of the company. And one of the first things she decides to do is rehire some of the people she feels are the most important people to help her get Deciem back on track. Stephen Kaplan, the CFO, and Dion, who was the PR manager. Along with rehiring them and getting their advice on how to handle certain parts of the business, they also figured out a way to mend their relationship with Sephora, and they were going back into Sephora stores. They continued with their brick and mortar expansion into New York, Chicago, London, as well as moving forward for the 2019 store openings in Los Angeles, Copenhagen, Madrid, Dublin, Paris, and Berlin. Huge responsibilities, all of this happening. So in November, it was reported that Brandon was hospitalized for a third time, his second time in London. And all in all, Nicholas said he was hospitalized 5 times, but these are the 3 that I personally found. This is the quote from the Financial Post that reported on the incident that got Brandon hospitalized this time. They said, "The streets in London on that day seemed to be set up just like a movie," Truaxe, 40, said in his interview since his court-ordered ouster. He was curious about what was happening around him, but also confused, he said. He passed beneath an archway into Horse Guards, the military parade ground beside the Prime Minister residence in Downing Street. Right away, guards accosted him. As he recalls it, they said a political party was being selected with the army somehow involved. Truaxe wanted to know more. Official records would later indicate he seemed elated and unaware of the risk he faced. A guard yelled at him to not get so close, and suddenly he was being thrown up against a wall, his ID checked by police. "I was walking very calmly in the park. I didn't understand if this was part of the movie or if this was actually a real political army selection. That's what the guard said. I was provoked to say, 'Please help me.' I was provoked to look paranoid," Truaxe said. And I really think that was done intentionally. That episode, soon to be diagnosed as psychotic, was how Truaxe came to be held against his will in St. Thomas Hospital, directly across the Thames from the Palace of Westminster, diagnosed with presumptive bipolar disorder and held for a fortnight under the UK Mental Health Act. He was released on November 16th after tribunal hearing, at which the hospital argued in support of his diagnosis, but acknowledged that lately the symptoms were not constant. By law, the key consideration is risk to self or others. Truaxe denies he is mentally ill. The hospital was unable to rebut Truaxe's lawyer's suggestion that his psychosis was induced by his use of psychedelic mushrooms and crystal meth. In the interview, Truaxe was alert, cogent, and sober after a week in the hospital. But things were about to get even worse for Brandon because, remember, he's not supposed to be going to the Deciem stores. Yeah, he decided to break that. He went to the Covent Garden store and he started causing a ruckus there. He walked in and he was telling them that they had things, laid out wrong in the store, and he was yelling at people, and they called the police. Then Brandon posted that video to Instagram. Again, I just have a very, very small piece of that I'm playing for you. In December, Brandon contacted Cheryl Wishover, and Cheryl had been one of the major reporters on all things Deciem since the very beginning. So Brandon contacts her, and he was quoted as saying, "During the last year, I've been concerned about possible, but very likely, financial wrongdoings related to one of our shareholders." I believe he's talking about Pasquale. "During this time, the shareholders of Deciem have attempted to present me as mentally unable, as a drug addict, as a person unqualified to run the business or even be a director to the public, to Deciem team, to police, to medical professionals, and now to courts." The article ends with a quote. And this is Cheryl Wishover talking. She says, "It seems that Deciem may be trying to recover and may succeed if the company can continue to provide the same products at a price point customers have become accustomed to. But there might be more to this saga. The unknown factor here, as always, is Truaxe." Just really good writing there. So I just wanted to read that to you because that was good writing. So remember how I said that the chronicling of this is very scattered, and in that, I'm not sure which clip belongs where in the timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play you clips that Brandon posted to the B Truaxe Instagram now. But I want to warn you that this is disturbing. Seeing Brandon like this is very upsetting. He is clearly not speaking clearly. He doesn't have a logical train of thought. It might be disturbing for some people.
President Donald Trump. DT is the perfect initials because Davut Trinder was the one that was really fooling me until Wolfond arrived. But, you actually did arrive late for tea. Because a few years back, I teed from the men's tea to the ladies' tea with David Trinder present. But I think I'm ready. I think Timothy Richardson was looking for a plastic card to cut me, but I think maybe I won't be shot this time. At 42 seconds, one. I need police. And this pill they gave me, but I don't know. They keep replacing my minibar, and then it deal with the mushrooms that I was doing that this drink.
The final clip I want to show you is the clip that Brandon posted the evening that he died. Brandon Truaxe passed away, and this is the last post from his apartment.
At 3203 33 Mill Street, all of a sudden there's developed a hole in it. Now my next door neighbor just got a delivery. He owns the place and didn't want to sell it for much more than market value. They bought from Delane Cooper. Now don't worry, this also reflects here. But CIA is helping draw. You were trying to do something in the freezer or fridge that's in the compartment there. That's a freezer at the bottom. So anyway, I think he's now collecting it and going to himself or herself in the door where they are. I've left the diesel bag outside if they want to think about it, okay? Hi guys, it's Brandon. I've had a bit of alcohol to drink tonight. It's this one, it's mezcal. Don't look here though. It's amazing, my Don Julio ran out, so I fill it with water. But this is mezcal Marco Negro. Look at the beautiful bottle. Anyways, I think from Mexico. Anyway, because I've indulged in some alcohol on a Saturday evening, I'm enjoying a drunken behavior. This is a preview, even though it came later. I know it doesn't look as good as the full thing. I suggest you watch the previous video, because the previous video, oh look, there's also a face here in the corner, but I'm talking about my face, but anyways. Good evening everyone. This is my home at 3203 33 Mill Street. It's a beautiful evening, and as I mentioned earlier, I had some tequila. And it's the perfect Saturday night to spend on your own. I love you guys. Mr. President, it's Brandon Truaxe. You said your country absolutely has to be prioritized first. I'm in my penthouse. You may have seen it, most likely haven't. It's 3203 33 Mill Street. When I got in the elevator, the elevators rang and the fire department and basically beep, beep, beep. After I'd called first to make sure that it's working, because there's a lot of installations have occurred at the distillery district. For example, there's this art piece, like a bear, and then in the middle, and there's a blue thing, and then this truck is coming to remove it now. It's a Saturday night at the distillery district where we got a condo. Donald, everything is okay. I want everyone just to learn. If they're worried about something, not worry. If they suspect something is strange, as the airport authorities say, if it's suspicious, tell someone. I love you.
On January 20th, 2019, Brandon Truaxe was found outside of his apartment complex. He had fallen from his balcony and died. No one was with him. No one saw what happened. No one will ever know exactly what happened. Since his death, there have been guesses. And of course, a lot of people go straight to that Brandon took his own life. The second theory was that somebody wanted to keep Brandon quiet, that he was talking too much, that he was accusing Estee Lauder of fraud, and that somebody from the company or somebody related murdered him. I was not there. I do not know what happened. All I can do is trust the people that knew him best, including Nicola. Nicola believes that Brandon fell. She doesn't believe that he killed himself. She doesn't believe that Estee Lauder was involved in some plot to end his life.
He was on his own when he passed away?
Yeah. He posted Instagram videos on that night. So, we know from various things that he was obviously still in this cycle of drug abuse and then kind of mental health. We don't know. No one was there. He fell off the balcony. I don't believe it was suicide with an intention to end his life, because I believe he'd have left a note. He'd have sent an email. He was big on words. That I find it hard to believe he would purposefully end things without having a last kind of voice in the world. But again, when you are in that situation, I don't know if he was sat on the edge and kind of felt it was a high floor apartment. There was kind of huge storms and winds that night, but none of us were there, so we'll we'll never truly know what happened.
Even since my last video, I have seen comments, the accusation that somebody from Estee Lauder or somebody hired by Estee Lauder pushed him. And I want to be clear as far as the evidence of this. No one saw anybody going up to Brandon's apartment. No one saw anyone coming out of Brandon's apartment. In the video, you can clearly see there is nobody there. He is scanning around the room, and they believe his death happened shortly after this video was taken. It's also important to note that QAnon conspiracy theorists had kind of latched themselves onto Brandon in recent days because of the posts that he was, talking to Donald Trump, and that he, was trying to communicate with Donald Trump. He was tagging Donald Trump, and QAnon conspiracy theorists were all about trying to peg corruption on this cabal of rich, influential people who were trying to keep people quiet. So it fit the QAnon narrative. But it's so important to recognize that there is zero evidence that any of that happened. And every person that was close to Brandon at that time has backed up each other's thoughts that Brandon simply fell. Hello, editing Jen here. So I wanted to clarify something really quickly, because I know that throughout this, I was wondering, was Brandon Truaxe a Trump supporter? Because that matters to people on both sides of that issue, especially considering the climate in 2025 when this video goes live. So let's look at this post very quickly. It says, more updates in very due course, butterfly, and then he puts a red butterfly for blue. I love you, Justice Penny, and at Real Donald Trump, and Muhammad Ali Iranpana. I still don't know fully who Muhammad is. I've seen him mentioned multiple times in Brandon's post, but I don't know who he is. I do, however, know who Justice Penny is. Justice Penny was the court justice that removed Brandon as CEO of Deciem. Brandon was not happy with Justice Penny for that action. So to put I love you to a person that we know that he was not happy with next to Donald Trump's name, I don't know 100% what that means, but I know there's something here that he's not saying, that there may be some sarcasm here. Also, the red butterfly for blue, we don't know what that means. So in the end, why I wanted to pause for a second is to just stress that we don't know where Brandon stood politically. We know he had respect for world leaders as a category. We know that he was speaking to Donald Trump in some of his rants, but we don't know truly what he thought. So I just wanted to put that in there and make sure that we understood all of the context so that you can decide for yourself what you believe. I've left it up to I just don't know. That's where I've left it in my own mind. With that being said, let's get back to the video. So the next morning, after Brandon had been found by police, the news media calls up Dion, who is the PR manager over at Deciem, and says, hey, Brandon Truaxe is reported to have died. Do you have a statement? And Dion knew nothing about it. So she was like, hold on, I don't have anything to say right now, and hung up with them, basically. She calls Nicola and says, I just got this phone call that Brandon has died. And Nicola's like, what the hell? She had literally just had her baby 3 weeks before. So she's caring for this newborn. She gets this call that her best friend, who has been going through all of this, who she's been going through all of this with, that he possibly could be dead. So Nicola hangs up with Dion. She calls up Stephen Kaplan, the CFO, and she says, Stephen, who was in Toronto, can you go by the police department on your way into work and see if there's any truth to this? So Stephen, she hangs up with Stephen. Stephen goes to the police department, and the police department confirms that, yes, Brandon's body was found outside of his apartment. Stephen calls Nicola back. She's in the middle of nursing her baby, and she finds out that Brandon, yes, is in fact dead. So then Nicola realizes, she's like, oh my gosh, if the media is contacting Dion, then that means they're going to start putting this out publicly soon. So I need to move very quickly. She is thinking in her head, who do I need to tell about this? Who needs to know about this right away? So she comes up with a list of about 10 people, and she just really fast writes an email. And she said in an interview, she didn't even remember what she typed. Like, she's surprised it was even coherent because she just went and typed as fast as she could. I'm going to read you a little piece of what she wrote. She says, "I can't believe I'm typing these words. Brandon has passed away over the weekend. Heartbroken doesn't come close to how I know many of you will be feeling." She announced that the brand offices will be closed, warehouses, factories, all the stores were temporarily closed so that employees can, quote, "take the time to cry with sadness, smile at the good times we had, reflect on what his genius built, and hug your loved ones a little harder." Estee Lauder also put out a statement that said, "Brandon Truaxe was a true genius, and we are incredibly saddened by the news of his passing. As the visionary behind Deciem, he positively impacted millions of people around the world with his creativity, brilliance, and innovation. This is a profound loss for all, and our hearts are with Nicola Kilner and the entire Deciem family." There was an article published in Business Insider, and it mentioned a person that I've mentioned a few times that I told you was going to be important, Riyadh, Sweden. So they talked to Riyadh, and Riyadh revealed that Brandon wasn't just his friend, but they were life partners, that they had been in a relationship for over 10 years. He told Canada's National Post that Brandon was not under any medical care since his release from the London hospital in November, and that he had been abusing crystal meth. In the press, Riyadh also backed up what Nicola had said, saying that he believed that Brandon must have fallen and that there's no way that he took his own life.
For how close I was to him, when he became unwell, I actually learned how much I didn't know about him. And I think, I think he had a lot of challenges of never feeling accepted for who he was, which makes me so sad because me as a person, and especially like the Deciem that we have now, like we truly accept anyone and love anyone. It doesn't matter like who you choose to love, where you're from, like you belong to us, and like we are grateful. If you want to be part of the family, you are the family. So I find it hard that he never felt that he never felt like he could be his true self, which I think I only learned more when he became unwell.
How?
Like he'd had this incredible life partner for 10 years that I didn't even know about.
A romantic partner?
Yeah.
A husband? A boyfriend?
Pretty much, yeah. And again, like those things that's a big thing to hide from someone.
Why was he hiding it?
Well, I can only think that was him feeling like he wouldn't be accepted for it. And I mean...
Because it's a man.
Yeah. And I mean, well, in the world today, but I mean, especially the beauty, like I'm so proud of the diverse team we have. Like he would have been so accepted, but I mean, he was from Iran. I think he maybe just had, well, I don't know. I can't say the reasons.
Attitudes are different.
Yeah. But he clearly never felt like he could share with the world who he truly was. And I mean, that's a huge thing to carry.
Riyadh further told the media that Brandon had changed dramatically over recent months, that he would often become angry to the point of yelling, which was out of character, and that he was highly erratic, that he hadn't seen Brandon in 5 days prior to his death, and he returned home to see the police at his apartment, and that he did share that apartment with Brandon. Remember, when we first introduced Riyadh into the story, Brandon had posted about him specifically saying that Riyadh wasn't his boyfriend and that he was not gay. But a few months after Brandon's death, Riyadh posted the sweetest video. It is a compilation of videos and photos of him and Brandon traveling the world. And it is just, it's heartbreaking and sweet. And I will link it down below in case you would like to watch the whole thing. But I do want to play a couple of clips for you because it is very clear how much the two loved each other. Now, Riyadh did put copyrighted music in the background of the video, so I'm going to have to replace that. But if you want to hear the original music, I'm sure it's so much better than whatever I replaced it with.
Far away another day, simple things will come my way. It'd be worth it, stay with me. They will drag us in the dirt, say the things that make us hurt, but I'll never give you up. Burning with love, it will never go away. I will.
This is the mechanism. You make it very difficult for the powder to go in. Therefore, the British females will have to shake very hard.
You're doing a much arm exercise.
Today, like a bond that never break. We are unbreakable, like a love song we remain, like a legend of today, like a picture in a frame. We are unbreakable. Many nights that we would meet, no one knew our secret street. Countless times you came home. Oh, the circumstances are...
Well, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and in 2025, there are countless dupe brands for The Ordinary, brands that have taken inspiration from the format of having a low-cost product with ingredient-focused names, brands like the Inky List, Good Molecules, Versed, Face Theory, Naturium, skincare lines within existing brands like e.l.f. and Revolution Beauty have all been inspired to try to get the money from customers the same way that The Ordinary did. And what's wild about this is that Brandon had pitched the idea of The Ordinary to investors before, and nobody was interested in helping him with it. But he proved to everybody that this kind of marketing really did work and that people appreciated the honesty behind this line. Brandon told people the secret that the skincare industry was hiding, the fact that ingredients like vitamin C and hyaluronic acid were in fact very inexpensive to produce, and that putting them into products was not revolutionary and didn't require an exorbitant price tag. Because you'd think that exposing this secret is a bit counterintuitive, because you want to have the lowest cost products at the highest price point to make the most profit, right? But what Brandon proved was that transparency and honesty and treating people fairly within the market created a brand loyalty. And that brand loyalty would get customers to continue coming back for more and more and more and more. And he literally undercut the entire skincare market. And the rest of the industry was either like, oh, what did he do to us? Or they were like, oh, let me copy this. It was one or the other, sometimes both. And I don't think anybody can deny that the skincare industry will never be the same, because besides the companies that directly ripped the idea of The Ordinary and have their own similar brands, there are so many companies now that are using ingredients as part of their marketing at all price points. Another thing I find absolutely fascinating about this story is that the people that were closest to Brandon seem to have this hole in their heart that can never be filled by anything else. When I found posts where he tagged people and I checked out the Instagram of the people that he tagged, you look at these Instagram accounts, and every year on Brandon's birthday, they're wishing him happy birthday. Every year on the day he died, they're saying that they missed him. Random posts where they're somewhere and they just take a picture of themselves and say, thinking of you, Brandon. Like, he made such a huge impact on the people that knew him best. I want to bring back another person that we mentioned earlier, Shameen Mohammed Jr., who was the director of operations at Deciem. He was interviewed after Brandon's death, and he does agree with Nicola and Riyadh, and he does think that Brandon was under the influence of some kind of substance and that he fell. One thing that's different about what Shameen says is that he disagrees with medical professionals that Brandon had some kind of mental illness. He believes it was all the drugs. He also believes that cutting Brandon off from Deciem by removing him as CEO isolated him, and that contributed to the decline going faster and him abusing the substances even more because it cut him off from his social circles. Shameen was quoted by the New York Times as saying, Brandon didn't magically become crazy in 8 months. He's always been like this. He's always been this manic guy who ran this company.
You need to make that judgment of your trust of me, which is listen to your soul, not to others. Remember, don't even listen to Brandon. Listen to you. What you know of Brandon. That's what I mean to everybody. Right.
Let's talk about Nicola and what she's been doing since Brandon passed away. So, of course, things normalized on the Deciem accounts. Nicola is a much more private person, and the accounts became much more professional and often highlight the fun that happens at Deciem. So, for example, this past Christmas, there was a video that they posted of the staff at Deciem having a gingerbread house making competition. It was absolutely adorable.
Welcome to the 3rd annual gingerbread house contest. Contestants have exactly 1 hour to build their gingerbread house. Let's go see how people feel. Angela, what's your strategy for today?
Plan. Be ready for anything.
So I really had to whip them into shape. We were unprepared until today. We have different people working on different things. As you can see, they're very focused, and if they're not, they get punished.
I am a 3rd place winner. Granted, there was only 5 teams, but I was a 3rd place winner.
You just said to me that you have some rumors?
I see some houses with no gingerbread.
How this is going to work is we're going to go around to each team and we're going to give you the mic, whoever's speaking for the team, and they will create the pitch.
After some interesting and creative pitches.
He's there. He's actually there. Hello, Glenn.
Oh, what fun it is to process paychecks every day.
It was a tough decision for the judges to pick.
The winner of this year's Deciem's Gingerbread House goes to team number 1.
So those are the things that Deciem focuses on the fun that's happening there, and also continuing to expose the industry and continuing to talk about the ways that the skincare industry needs to be more transparent. The most significant insight into what Nicola's been through since Brandon's death was her interview with Stephen Bartlett from Diary of a CEO. I've been showing you clips from that interview throughout the series. I highly recommend you watch the whole thing and everything that Stephen Bartlett does, because Diary of a CEO is absolutely incredible. Stephen Bartlett's incredible. Go over there and support him because he does amazing things over there. But Nicola's interview, definitely watch that if you want to watch something after this, if you want to learn more. One of the biggest revelations in Stephen's interview with Nicola happened when Nicola was talking about that she had actually been through a situation like this before. And it was when her father passed away.
Your father passed when you were...
When I was 20. And again, it's very hard because probably see some similarities, I think, between kind of what happened back then and I guess just the uncontrollability and the ability to help the situation, because, up until the age of, when I was 18, 2 years before he passed away, I mean, he was healthy, he was well, he liked to drink, but, not to the point of being an alcoholic. And then very quickly things spiraled. So he loved being a radio presenter and that was his life. But I think it is a hard industry where suddenly you're not current anymore and there's younger presenters coming through and suddenly it was taken away from him. And I think that created just a spiral. And, he also, I think, had challenges with his upbringing, and alcohol just became a coping mechanism. And again, I think it just... both times it surprised me how quickly it can happen. And again, with 2 years, my father had gone. Again, you go from someone who you love and who loves you and who would do anything for you and for their family, to suddenly, again, this not talking the same language. And again, it's very hard, I think, with addiction and any of it, alcohol abuse, because you find it hard, why can't they just stop? They love us, why do they want to be in this situation? And again, it takes the rethinking around, they can't help it, this is an illness just like cancer, like other diseases, their brain is ill and they can't think of anything other than how they can get the next drink. And I think it's just a hard thing to accept, feeling helpless when there isn't a medication. Again, in the UK, you can't put someone into rehab unless they want to go, but they've got their brain battling with them that won't allow them to make that decision.
And when everything happened with Brandon, it was like history repeating itself again. You watch someone you love slowly slip away into...
Yeah, it was... I guess one of the differences with my dad, he never became... He was still very loving and kind, even though, you know, he couldn't stop. Whereas I think with Brandon, it was... Things were much more... It was more anger, and it was kind of more... Yeah. My dad always still had the love and the kindness coming through even when he was ill.
Another thing I want to mention about Nicola that absolutely warms my heart is that it seems like she is really trying so hard to make Brandon's dreams come true, to make sure that his vision lives on. So one of his last projects that he was adamant about getting going was Avistan, which was his fragrance company. He already had a location that he had designed in London, and Nicola opened it. And after researching Deciem and Brandon for months, this store is so exactly the way I would imagine Brandon would have wanted it. Brandon hated advertising. Avistan has no advertising. Zero advertising. You're not even allowed to film in the store and post on social media. There are 2 stores now, one in London and one in New York City, and each store only carries 1 fragrance. They carry 1 fragrance in 2 formats, a perfume oil and an eau de parfum. The London store opened in 2022, and the New York store literally just opened this past November in 2024. So the London store, the one that Brandon designed, they've purposely left unfinished as a tribute to him. This whole store is so freaking weird. So you can't buy the fragrance online, can't buy it. If you go to the Deciem website, Avistan's not even listed as a Deciem brand. If you go on the website, if you go into the store, there's no notes listed about what the fragrance smells like, because Brandon wanted people to have their own experience, and whatever it smells like to you, that's what the notes are. That's the way that he wanted it. And the original fragrance has no name. If you really want notes, a reporter did say that it has notes of clay, charred wood, black pepper, and cumin. It is priced pretty reasonably. It's £38 for 50 milliliters. And you can only buy this fragrance by walking into the physical store location. And this is the most wild part about it for me, is that supposedly the store is doing super well, and there's often lines around the corner of people waiting to go in. Like, what? Like, how? How? Supposedly, it has a huge cult following on TikTok and also on Red Note, which this article that I read was from December of 2023, way before the TikTok refugees found Red Note. But apparently, Red Note, which is a Chinese app only for Chinese users pretty much, are obsessed with Avistan. The majority of Red Note users are women who are really into beauty and fashion and fragrance and traveling and all of that. So many people over there document their experience traveling to the Avistan store and their experience buying the products. Of course, after they leave the store, because they're not allowed to record in the store. Another passion project that was very important to Brandon, it was actually one of the original named Deciem brands that never launched, was the body care brand Loofah. I saw it show up multiple times on the list of coming soon brands from Deciem, but it never launched until Nicola launched it in 2024. And one thing that's really special about Loofah, that if you don't know the lore of the brand, you may not think that it's that special, but it's one of the scents that they have over there, the smell of chalk. Now, Brandon always said that the smell of chalk is a memory for pretty much everybody on the planet. Everybody has some memory of chalk, and it crosses cultures around the world. So what I did was I bought one. I tell you, the research that I've done into Deciem makes me want to buy all of the products. I've stopped at the Deciem website like 3 times since I started this research. Anyway, so I bought this. This is the Loofah Chalk Hand and Body Wash. And when I smelled this, I was like, yeah, that smells like chalk. And like immediately I'm sitting here thinking the memories that I have of chalk throughout my life, you know, when I'm a kid and I'm outside and I've got my colored chalk and I'm drawing on the ground, you know, and knowing that it's going to wash away with a rainstorm. I'm thinking about, you know, when I was a teenager in early college and we're at the pool hall and, you know, the boys are over there and we're trying to look cute playing pool, but we really suck at it. And we're chalking our pool cues. And I'm sitting here thinking about, you know, the 1 year that I spent in CrossFit which was a time in my life, but we used chalk on our hands when we were working with the barbells. So it's like I have all these memories of chalk, and it's like it brought everything back, and Brandon was absolutely right. Besides that, it's just a really nice soap. I've been using it as a hand soap because I have tons of body soap right now, but I have it in my bedroom bathroom sink as my hand soap, and I love it. It's very nice. Unfortunately, after Brandon passed away, there were some brand casualties in that some of the brands could no longer continue. The team over at Deciem ended 4 brands: HIF, Hylamide, Abnomaly, and the chemistry brand. And I remember there being an outroar about Hylamide specifically being discontinued. A lot of fans blamed the Estee Lauder acquisition because by then they had, I think, a majority stake at that point when those 4 brands closed, and people blamed Estee Lauder. But I think what people need to recognize is that Brandon was not afraid to get rid of brands that he felt like were not working. He did it all the time. So even if he was still alive, it's possible those brands wouldn't have survived. Speaking of Estee Lauder, they did complete their full acquisition of Deciem on June 3rd, 2024. The total investment of the company into Deciem is approximately $1.7 billion. And then the latest news dropped while I was researching for this video that Nicola Kilner has officially stepped down as CEO of Deciem. She's continuing on as of January 1st, 2025 as just the brand founder. She's still working with the team as far as creative direction, but she's living her dream. She had always said from the very beginning that her goal was to work her ass off in her 20s, I guess into her 30s, so that she could spend time being a mom and spending time with her family. And now she's doing that. She's living that dream.
Like, people always ask me, like, and I have no plans to leave Deciem, but people always say, like, after Deciem, what do you want to do? And they always don't believe me when I say, like, I just want to be a mum. Like, that's so important to me. Like, and again, I talk about chapters in life. Like, if that's that period that I get one chance at life to do, then I want to prioritize that. And I think, you know, sometimes people associate, well, because you've been like business and you've been driven, that becomes a conflict. But it doesn't, because also I think the qualities that make me want to dedicate so much to my children and being a good mum are probably also what actually makes the culture what it is at Deciem today.
And I think we might be able to all agree that after all that she's been through and all of the work she put into making this brand survive, that she deserves to live her dream. So that's the story. That's how it all happened. That is the extraordinary, true story of the ordinary. And I hope that you found it interesting. This was a true labor of love out of respect for Deciem, for Nicola, for Brandon, for the entire team over at Deciem that has made this brand happen. This is a labor of love out of the appreciation for how much Deciem has done for consumers in lowering prices of high quality products, in bringing transparency to an industry that did not want to be transparent. They literally changed the skincare industry forever. And I personally, as a skincare customer, am so, so grateful. So if you are still here, we're going to do something really special, and we're going to speak in Brandon emoji in the comment section. So of course you can comment whatever you want, and you can leave an emoji if you want to. The way we're going to talk is we're going to use the emojis the way that Brandon did. So if you'd like to leave a little emoji for Nicola, you're going to use the snail. If you want to leave a tribute to the staff at Deciem, you're going to put a monkey. If you want a tribute to Brandon, that's the jaguar. And if you want a tribute to Deciem as a whole and the rebirth of the skincare industry and transparency and just Deciem, you're putting a blue butterfly. That's how Brandon communicated. So if you would like to speak in Brandon emoji, you can do that in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Mad love to you. And I will see you in a video very, very soon. Bye.